Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Namaste and good morning and welcome, everyone. There won't be any announcements this morning. If you want to know what the announcements are, look in next week's newsletter, which will include February's calendar as well as any other announcements. With that, though, is there anything that should be said that hasn't been said anyway in the way of an announcement or concern or issue? All right. January has been a month for the study of Jnana Yoga, Advaita Vedanta. As a Jnana yogi, you practice discrimination, reason, detachment, and satyagraha, insistence on truth. The goal is freedom from limitation, moksha. Our teachers say that all our miseries in life are caused by seeing inaccurately. An earnest and persistent jnani may break through this misapprehension, maya, and see only the divine presence everywhere, in everything, and in everyone. So this morning, our topic is Modern Masters of Advaita, Modern Masters of the Non-Dual Path, Vivekananda, Ramana Maharshi Nisargadatta Maharaj, and our guest from the world of quantum physics, a man who, as Vivekananda said would happen, at some point he said, science and religion will shake hands. Well, David Bohm is one of those who has shaken hands for all it's worth with religion. You'll find, I think, what he has to say quite interesting. So as a frame of reference for what I'm about to talk about, let's just say, as always, this is not personal instruction for you. This is not dogma. This is not something that must be done. It's an invitation. And this morning's invitation has a particular significance. One of the characteristics of a spiritual aspirant is the ability to hold two thoughts in mind, two thoughts or two systems of thought in mind. One being their current way of thinking, speaking, and acting, and the other, the ideal, that which they have been given by their teachers, the great masters of the world, as a higher ideal. The invitation is to hold both those thoughts in mind as we go through this morning. Now we're going to do things a little differently this morning than we normally do. Normally we pause during the discussion. during the talk for discussion. This time, we're going to have an open forum on this topic at the end. So I ask you to hold your thoughts, your wisdom, your questions, your concerns until then. So here opens the invitation. Our current beliefs are the operating system for a life within Maya. They reveal the level of our ignorance and how we cope with what arises. Nothing more than that. Now, let me just say that all of you who are here this morning have obviously learned to cope with life in a successful way, to whatever degree you define it as success. Otherwise, why would you be here this morning? You've achieved success in one sense, and now you're looking for something more. However, learning higher practical and spiritual beliefs, though that's said to be auspicious because they cause fewer agitations in the mind, yet, from the Advaita perspective, fetters, though of gold, are not less strong to bind. Fetters, though of gold, are not less strong to bind. That means that anything we can hold in the mind is a limitation. And the goal of Advaita is to be beyond all limitation. This morning, we will discuss the lives and teachings of three great masters of the non-dual path. All of them lived outside the grip of Maya, and all of them taught in the 20th century. Vivekananda for just a couple of years before he left the body on July 4th, 1902, but nevertheless, his teachings go on resonating right into the 21st century. We'll start by reviewing short biographies of these three. Swami Vivekananda's birthday, his lunar birthday, we celebrated last Sunday. And then we'll start with the short biographies of Ramana Maharshi Nisargadatta Maharaj. Next, we'll compare and contrast what these three taught about four important principles and practices of Advaita Vedanta. So first we'll go over their biographies, short biographies. Then we'll go over a little bit of what they taught on these principles and practices of Advaita: discrimination, detachment, concentration, and insistence on truth. Then we'll practice 10 minutes of silence. We'll practice 10 minutes of silence, and there will be instruction for how you might want to approach this 10 minutes of silence to be well within what we're talking about today when we get to that. So then today's meeting will end with an open forum on non-dualism. So please gather your thoughts and your questions on that subject. We really do like to hear from you. And as you'll hear from David Bohm, there's very good reason for that, for studying the art of spirituality together and doing the discussion part together. We'll start with this from Vivekananda's inspired talks. The internal universe, the real, is infinitely greater than the external, which is only a shadowy projection of the true one. This world is neither true nor untrue. It is the shadow of truth. I'm going to repeat that. This is such a key point. The internal universe, the real, is infinitely greater than the external, which is only a shadowy projection of the true one. This world is neither true nor untrue. It is the shadow of truth. Be brave and sincere, then follow any path with devotion, and you must reach the whole. One may hold. Once, only once lay hold of one link of the chain, and the whole chain must come by degrees. Water the roots of the tree, that is, reach the Lord, and the whole tree is watered. Getting the Lord, we get all. So this is Swami Vivekananda talking about essentially all the paths, but if we just replace the word Lord with the word Brahman, it becomes applicable to Advaita. So I said we'd do biographies of the three that we're going to study. Ramana Maharshi was born December 30th, 1870, in a village called, I can't read that word, about 30 miles south of Madurai in southern India. His middle-class parents named him Venkataram. His father died when he was 12, and Venkataram went to live with his uncle in Madurai, where he attended the American Mission High School. At age 16, he became spontaneously self-realized. 6 weeks later, he ran away to the holy hill of Arunachala, where he would remain for the rest of his life. For several years, he stopped talking and spent many hours each day in samadhi. When he began speaking again, people came to ask him questions, and he soon acquired a reputation as a sage, as a rishi. In 1907, when he was 28, one of his early devotees named him Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. His name means Divine Eminent Ramana, the Great Seer, and that name stuck. Not because he wanted it to, but because that's how people wanted to speak of and to him. Eventually, he became world famous, and an ashram was built around him. He died of cancer in 1950 at the age of 70. So that's a brief biography of Ramana Maharshi. Nisargadatta Maharaj was born on April 17, 1897. Nisargadatta Maharaj was born on April 17, 1907. He was named Maruti in honor of Hanuman. After his father died in 1915, Maruti went to Bombay, where he worked as a clerk and later sold hand-rolled cigarettes, bidis. Eventually, he owned 8 bidi shops and became financially prosperous. In 1933, a friend brought him to his guru, who gave him instructions. Maruti was moved by those instructions and made his first steps toward practice spirituality. After his guru passed away in 1936, Maruti felt a strong sense of renunciation. He left his business and family and went on a pilgrimage to the Himalayas. During that journey, he met a brother disciple who persuaded him to go back to Bombay and practice spirituality within the world. When he returned in 1938, his business had significantly declined, but it was enough to sustain him and his family. He began to devote all his free time to following his guru's instructions, and within 3 years, he realized that he was not the body and ego, but all-pervading awareness. In 1951, he began taking disciples. He regularly gave talks in his prime and answered questions. These are summarized in the book I Am That, which has become a modern classic of Advaita philosophy. Sri Nisargadatta gave his advice and instructions by a simple, practical way without much use of complex religious or spiritual language. Nisargadatta Maharaj died September 8, 1981, of throat cancer. Now, most of you already know the life of Vivekananda, but just to give a short summary. He was born Narendranath Datta to a high caste Kayashta family. His father was a lawyer. His grandfather had renounced the world and become a sannyasin. And so Narendra was believed by Sri Ramakrishna, and he told the world, Sri Ramakrishna told the world, that Narendranath Datta was in fact the sage Nara, one of the 7 ever-free souls, rishis, the Sapta rishis, the 7 rishis that are the pillars of the universe. And he said, when Vivekananda, or he called him Naren, when Naren came to know who he truly was, he would leave the body. Narendranath became Sri Ramakrishna's disciple when he was in his teens. He studied with the master for about 5 years. Narendra had gotten a very extensive Western education. And so his skepticism, when it came to the world of spirituality, was very deep. And so he asked each yogi or sadhu that he met, have you seen God? And most of them gave him evasive answers like, oh, you have the eyes of a yogi, and so on. When he asked Sri Ramakrishna this question, Sri Ramakrishna said, yes, I see him now even more clearly than I see you. Well, of course, Narendra was quite taken aback. And he was further taken aback when Sri Ramakrishna pulled him into another room and said, why have you kept me waiting so long? I've waited so long for you, and so on and so forth. And in Narendra's words, behaved like a madman. But then when they went back in the other room where the rest of the devotees were, Sri Ramakrishna behaved in the most sane and straightforward way explaining the high ideas of spirituality to these other devotees. Of course, Narendra was completely confused. First of all, he didn't understand how he could be so overwhelmed by such a one. And he didn't understand how he could be both this madman in one moment and this great teacher in the next. Well, that skepticism went on for some time. Narendra actually mocked Sri Ramakrishna and said, these ideas of yours, that you have these visions and so on, and these high realizations, these samadhis of yours, they're just hallucinations. Well, eventually, due to Sri Ramakrishna's overpowering love, Narendra became persuaded of the primacy of consciousness and its appearance to us both in form as Maya, as Shakti, and in his case in the form of Kali, Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual ideal and teacher. As this conversion became complete, he became Sri Ramakrishna's foremost disciple to the world. And so in 1893, he came to the Parliament of World Religions, became internationally famous, actually, and continued to teach. In 1895, he had his second state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. The first had been given to him by Sri Ramakrishna. The second came to him when he was at Thousand Island Park in upstate New York in 1895. Now, Sri Ramakrishna had said, when you come to that state again, it means your mission has been completed, your work is finished, and you may leave at will. But Narendra, or by that time Swami Vivekananda, did not. He stayed another 7 years from 1895 to 1902. And we get a glimpse of what kept him with us on February 2nd, 1896, when he delivered his talk, The Atman, to the Brooklyn Ethical Association. He had been quite persuasive that Advaita Vedanta, or seeking knowledge of the Atman, was the purpose of human life during that talk. You can see that if you read the talk. Well, at the end of the talk, a reporter said, Swami, Hinduism is not thought of as a proselytizing religion. And Swami Vivekananda said, after a moment's reflection, I have a mission to the West as Buddha had a mission to the East. And that mission we can see unfold so powerfully over the next 7 years, both here in the West and in India. So he burned up his body. He was known as the cyclonic monk. He burned up his body by age 39, and so quite voluntarily left the body July 4th, 1902. So that's a brief, very brief summary of Swami Vivekananda's life. So I said we'd go through the teachings very quickly of these three great masters on 4 points: discrimination, detachment, concentration, and insistence on truth. So first, discrimination. Ramana Maharshi. Know that the eradication of the identification with the body is charity, spiritual austerity, and ritual sacrifice. It is virtue, divine union, and devotion. It is heaven, wealth, peace, and truth. It is grace. It is the state of divine silence. It is the deathless death. It is jnana, renunciation, final liberation, and bliss. And what is all that? Eradication of the identification with the body, discrimination. Nisargadatta Maharaj. It is always the false that makes you suffer, the false desires and fears, the false values and ideas, the false relationships between people. Abandon the false, and you are free of pain. Truth makes happy. Truth liberates. It is always the false that makes you suffer, the false desires and fears, the false values and ideas, the false relationships between people. Abandon the false, and you are free of pain. Truth makes happy. Truth liberates. Now, it's easy to make a confusion here. Abandon the false relationships between people. This doesn't mean you shouldn't have relationships between people. But if you think about your relationships, you will know that there are some that are deep and true, and there are some that are false. False usually means there's some motive involved. The true relationships are motiveless. So it's easy, it's just like it's easy to get confused when Swami Vivekananda writes in the evening hymn, those who have cast fame, fortune, and friends away. It isn't that you don't have friends. It's that your friendship with them is motiveless. You love them because you love them, not for some reason. You don't depend on them. It's dependence that creates the falseness. Vivekananda on discrimination. Come up, O lions, and shake off the delusion that you are sheep. You are souls immortal, spirits free, blessed and eternal. Ye are not matter, ye are not bodies. Matter is your servant, not you the servant of matter. Each one of you is only a conduit for the infinite ocean of knowledge and power that lies behind mankind. That infinite ocean of knowledge and power, of course, is the Atman, Brahman. So those are the teachings, the three teachings on discrimination. On the subject of detachment, Ramana Maharshi, your duty is to be and not to be this or that. Your duty is to be and not to be this or that. I am that I am sums up the whole truth. The method is summed up in the words, be still. The method is summed up in the words, be still. What does stillness mean? What does stillness mean? It means destroy yourself, because any form or shape is the cause for trouble. Give up the notion that I am so-and-so. All that is required to realize the self is to be still. What can be easier than that? Detachment. Be still. All that is required to realize the self is to be still. What can be easier than that? Nisargadatta Maharaj. A quiet mind is all you need. All else will happen rightly once your mind is quiet. As the sun on rising makes the world active, so does self-awareness affect changes in the mind. In the light of calm and steady self-awareness, inner energies wake up and work miracles without any effort on your part. Notice the emphasis on the ease. It's not simple, but it's easy. Vivekananda. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all three, and be free. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples. Or temples or forms are but secondary details. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. So that's the three on detachment. Concentration. Ramana Maharshi. You can only stop the flow of thoughts by refusing to have any interest in them. You can only stop the flow of thoughts by refusing to have any interest in them. You can only stop the flow of thoughts by refusing to have any interest in them. There is neither creation nor destruction, neither destiny nor free will, neither path nor achievement. This is the final truth. There is neither past nor future. There is only the present. Nisargadatta Maharaj. As you watch your mind, you discover yourself as the watcher. When you stand motionless, only watching, you discover yourself to be the light behind the watcher. The source of light is dark. Unknown is the source of knowledge. That source alone is. Go back to that source and abide there. As you watch your mind, you discover yourself as the watcher. When you stand motionless, only watching, you discover yourself as the light behind the watcher. The source of light is dark. The unknown is the source of knowledge. The source alone is. Go back to that source and abide there. That's Nisargadatta. Vivekananda. Take up one idea. This is a concentration. Take up one idea. Make that one idea your life. Think of it. Dream of it. Live on that idea. Let the brain, muscles, nerves, every part of your body be full of that idea and just leave every other idea alone. This is the way to success. Take up one idea. Take that one idea. Take up one idea. Make that one idea your life. Think of it. Dream of it. Live on that idea. Let the brain, muscles, nerves, every part of your body be full of that idea and just leave every other idea alone. This is the way to success. So that's the 3 on concentration. Insistence on truth. Ramana Maharshi. Once the current of awareness of the self is set afoot, it becomes everlasting and continuous by intensification. There is no greater mystery than this, that we keep seeking reality, though in fact we are reality. We think that there is something hiding reality, and that it must be destroyed before reality is gained. How ridiculous! A day will dawn when you will laugh at all your past efforts. That which will be the day you laugh is also here and now. A day will dawn when you will laugh at all your past efforts. That which will be the day you laugh is also here and now. Insistence on truth. Once you realize that the road is the goal and that you are always on the road, not to reach a goal, but to enjoy its beauty and its wisdom, life ceases to be a task and becomes natural and simple in itself an ecstasy. Once you realize that the road is the goal and that you are always on the road, not to reach a goal, but to enjoy its beauty and its wisdom, life ceases to be a task and becomes natural and simple in itself an ecstasy. Vivekananda. When an idea exclusively occupies the mind, it is transformed into an actual physical or mental state. When an idea exclusively occupies the mind, it is transformed into an actual physical or mental state. So those are the teachings of these 3 masters on discrimination, detachment, concentration, and insistence on truth. Of course, they're only just a tiny, tiny fraction of what we can gather from them. So this file will be available online as the notes for this talk. I've left many, many other quotes in the file so that if you wish to study further without buying a book, if you wish to study further what these great masters said, The quotes aren't classified as I've classified them just now, but they're quotes gathered about their teachings. So if you want to know more about what Ramana Maharshi Nisargadatta Maharaj and Vivekananda said about this spiritual life, and especially about the path of Advaita Vedanta, then you'll find it all there. Now, I mentioned that I would take up someone from the realm of science. The man that I'm about to read to you about was stellar in his field, which was physics, quantum physics. His name is David Bohm. David Joseph Bohm was born 20th December 1917 and died 27 October 1992, was an American-British scientist who has been described as one of the most significant theoretical physicists of the 20th century, and who contributed unorthodox ideas to quantum theory, neuropsychology, and the philosophy of mind. Bohm advanced the view that quantum physics meant that the old Caesarean model of reality, I'm sorry, it's not Caesarean. I'm not sure how to pronounce that word. Sayesian, I guess, model of reality, that there are two kinds of substance, the mind, the mental, and the physical, that somehow interact, was too limited. Bohm advanced the idea that quantum physics meant that the old model of reality, that there are two kinds of substance, one mental and the physical, that somehow interact, was too limited. To complement it, he developed a mathematical and physical theory of implicate and extricate order. He also believed, there's a link, by the way, if you want to know what those terms mean rather than go into them here. There's a link that'll be in the file, so you can click on it. He developed a mathematical and physical theory of implicate and explicate order. He also believed that the brain, at the cellular level, works according to the mathematics of some quantum effects, and postulated that thought is distributed and non-localized. Thought, consciousness, awareness. He postulated that thought is distributed and non-localized, just as quantum energies are. Bohm warned of the dangers of rampant reason and technology, advocating instead the need for genuine, supportive dialogue, which he claimed could broaden and unify conflicting and troublesome divisions in the social world. David Bohm thought of science as being too obsessed with calculations and not giving enough attention to the underlying nature of reality. He believed the conflicts between Einstein's relativity and quantum theory can be unified through undivided wholeness. That's a particular term that he used, undivided wholeness. Bohm came to know Jiddu Krishnamurti and felt it personally necessary to go beyond the narrow constraints and limitations of general scientific methodology in his quest to understand the fundamental nature of being. He thought transformation must start at the individual level, and that society is nothing more than the totality of individuals who are caught up and in deeply let me start that sentence again. He thought transformation must start at the individual level, and that society is nothing more than the totality of individuals who are caught up in deeply embedded collective conditioned programs, religion, science, politics, that are continually reinforcing themselves. To bring about meaningful change, we must get to the roots of those conditioned programs. Bohm highlights the need for a source of new ideas at a much higher energy level that could be directed toward the problems that face mankind. And now you'll understand why this comes at the last here. Because we're just about to do what he suggests. Bohm believed that there is tremendous energy in people when they think together in groups. The liberation of such energy could provide an immense impetus to the whole society, to avoid the disasters that threaten mankind. Here are some quotes from Bohm. A great many people think they are thinking when they are merely rearranging their prejudices. What are prejudices in our lingo? Samskaras. They're just rearranging their mental impressions. Next quote. Suppose we were able to shape meanings freely without a compulsive urge to impose our view or conform to those of others, and without distortion and self-deception. Would this not constitute a real revolution? The notion of a separate organism is clearly an abstraction, as is also its boundary. Underlying all this is unbroken wholeness, even though our civilization has developed in such a way as to strongly emphasize the separation into parts. And of course, there's reasons for that, self-interested reasons. There is a universal flux that cannot be defined explicitly, but which can be known only implicitly, as indicated by the explicitly definable forms and shapes, some stable and some unstable, that can be abstracted from the universal flux. In this flow, mind and matter are not separate substances. Rather, they are different aspects of our whole and unbroken movement. The notion that all these fragments are separately existent is evidently an illusion, and this illusion cannot be other. It cannot do other, and this illusion cannot do other than lead to endless conflict and confusion. And finally, the final quote, the ability to perceive or think differently is more important than the knowledge gained. The ability to think, to perceive, the ability to perceive or think differently is more important than the knowledge gained. And that's exactly what all of the yogas teach us to do, perceive and think differently. That's what I mean about holding two thoughts simultaneously in mind. The way we currently think, speak, and behave, which cannot be said to be wrong. It's successful, but it's limited. We feel the chafe of those limitations. We feel the ache of being unfree. So, Advaita Vedanta presents this other system and principles and practices. When we hold that thought in mind and compare and contrast the way we currently are with the teachings of, in this case, Advaita Vedanta or Jnana Yoga, we may slowly and slowly come to adopt as a way of thinking and therefore speaking and acting those ideas, those principles, and those practices. Notice that silence is stillness is one of the things that is highly recommended. So we're going to practice 10 minutes of silence. Here are the instructions for doing it the way that you're being invited to. You do it however you like. But here are instructions for how to do it according to becoming the witness or the watcher, as Nisargadatta called it. As we begin the 10 minutes of silence, just turn your attention toward what's going on in your mind. Don't try to do anything at all other than watch. If your mind becomes distracted by something, let it follow that distraction. Don't try to restrain it. For example, a siren may go by outside, or someone may call out in the house where you are loudly. Just observe your reaction to it and how long the reaction lasts and where your mind goes next. Don't attempt to do anything at all. Don't take any action other than simply watching the mind. I will just ask for any questions or any concerns about those instructions. Is there anything that you'd like amplified, or any concern or question you have about the instructions that were given for observing this 10 minutes of silence?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Yes. Eyes closed or open either way, or
As pleases yourself, dear. It's usually best to close your eyes.
Okay.
But simply because it's easier not to be pulled outward.
Yes.
But if you're pulled outward, just watch your mind be pulled outward.
And when my eyes are closed, I'm doing visualization of my Ishta Devta.
No, don't do anything. I said no
Okay.
activity whatsoever.
Okay.
No visualization, no mantra chanting, no
Okay.
watching your breath, nothing.
Okay.
Just simply watch your mind.
Thank you.
Just simply be still and watch your mind. It's very instructive. Anything else from anyone? All right. I'm going to set my clock here for us to do this. And so it'll wake us up, so to speak. So it's what time now? Okay. Again, very quietly for 10 minutes. Let us just watch our minds in stillness. So now let's begin our open forum on these ideas. And we might want to start with our experience of what it was like to watch our mind for 10 minutes. If anybody would like to offer anything about that.
May I start?
Yes, please, Uma.
One thing I found very funny, very difficult, is to not have any thought without, and I cannot watch my mind if there is something not given to me to focus on, to concentrate on. Because usually what I do is keep an idea, just like Swami Vivekananda said, have one idea or some special mantra or something to keep my mind focused on.
Mm-hmm.
Without, what do I watch if my mind, you know what I'm saying? It's very difficult to explain.
No, it's not at all difficult to explain. I think we all understand
So
that.
that's something to think about. And that itself was an exercise for me to be totally still. And I hope that is conducive to what we are aiming at.
Yes, well, this is, we're told by these great ones that stillness is a great teacher.
Mhm.
So when we watch our minds, we see how unstill the mind really is. And how can we hear that teachings from the silence when our mind is so busy? It just, and in your case, as you said, the conundrum was, how do I do nothing with my mind? How do I have no task but just to watch what goes on? Thank you, Uma. Anyone else? Anything at all from their experience of
Shankara?
watching? Yes, please.
Yeah. I found that my mind wandered to so many different thoughts, but because I didn't engage with it, I was less agitated, and it just moved on from one to the other, but it didn't stay with anything compelling me that I had to solve this or that. It just kind of moved on.
Mm-hmm. Thank
So
you.
overall, I was still at the end of it more peaceful.
Yes. Just the exercise of watching the mind, of becoming the watcher, will make us more peaceful. Over time, that state becomes more and more pronounced, and the thoughts become fewer and fewer. Your breathing slows, and so on. Breathing is associated with thinking, the actions of the prana, the gunas on the prana. Anyone else? Anything at all?
Brother, if it's difficult to, am I audible?
Yes,
If it is difficult to sort of unsettling rather to watch the mind, especially when you're sitting in darkness, is it okay to watch the sensations on your body or watch the body?
Well, if that's what arises in the mind, then of course, yes. If, my back aches or my nose itches, these are things that arise in the mind. When you're just watching the mind, and what it is processing. There's no limitations on it whatsoever. So if you have your eyes closed, as you say, you're in the dark. But as Nisargadatta Maharaj pointed out, the light is the source, but the light comes from the dark. So slowly and slowly, when you have no other task but to watch the mind, you become identified with the watcher, which is a very different identification than being identified with the body. You notice that something is happening with the body, but in a way it doesn't seem to be you to whom it is happening. It's simply happening to the body. There's an itch in the back. The nose tickles. My toe aches. But it's my toe in the sense that, my spatula for turning the eggs. It isn't really me.
Yeah, Brother Shankara.
Yes, dear.
When I was quiet, I was listening to my heartbeat. That's it.
Well, that's highly recommended by Mirabai. It indicates a lot of years of practice of meditation that you are attentive to the heartbeat or to the sound of the blood running through your veins. If that's all, but not if you gave it that task. That was not what was in the instructions. Not that anything's wrong, but if you said, "Well, I'm going to have my mind watch my heart, listen to my heartbeat," that's not the same thing as simply watching the mind. But if the mind simply did gravitate toward hearing the heartbeat, that is the watcher watching the mind.
That is watching the mind. That is the right thing.
Well, there is no right or wrong, but there was the invitation to do it in a certain way. But if you instructed your mind to listen to the heartbeat, well, that was something other than the instructions. The instruction was to take no action.
Okay.
Give your mind no instruction. Simply watch it if it's left to itself.
I'll try that. Thank you.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
thank you so much for this. I first felt a bit uncomfortable when I started the silence. Then I just let the thoughts come. It was interesting. First, I had all these thoughts of gratitude for my life, for my family, for you, for so much that's been given to me and to my family and friends. True gratitude for the life. Then the worry about what's happening with many things in our country, in our world, and even in my family and friends. So those thoughts came. Then the thoughts came, like you were saying in the beginning of today, we have to kind of move towards a different kind of success, a different kind of life. So maybe I am beginning that phase, though we had a lot of success and a lot of joy and in different ways with family, careers, and life. I do feel lack of that inner peace. And I felt like maybe that's kind of what I need to work towards, the inner peace and more pure joy. And then at the final, my mind really became quiet. I almost lost track of time, and I became calmer until the bell rang. I was in that place. So thank you for giving me the time to experience this.
And we can do that anytime by ourselves.
Yes.
Just set a little timer for 10 minutes and just just watch your mind for 10 minutes. And I too got into that space of I lost awareness of where I was or what I was doing. It was just this kind of, as you say, calmness. Then I remembered we were watching our minds, and it was actually kind of comical. Yes.
I think it's very hard, I can say about myself, not to associate with my mind and with the thoughts. Intellectually, I get that. Yes. But in reality, I am probably eons away from it.
Not as long as you might think, dear. Not as long as you might think. It's a matter of practice. It's a matter of being the watcher and just simply watching the mind. And after a while, we understand much more the nature of the mind and how it cannot possibly be me, because I am continuous. The mind is constantly changing. My sense of I am is continuous. This is what Ramana Maharshi points out. Your sense of I am is continuous. Everything else is always changing. So that can't possibly be you, because the you is, according to these great teachers, the you is continuous, without interruption, birthless, deathless, all those things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from this or anything else now that you would like to talk about?
Brother, I feel that sometimes there's a baby in us which needs a pacifier, especially in meditation.
Well, what is the pacifier?
Like, for example, in darkness, it's sort of unsettling, but I notice that when I'm driving, the baby is busy in, switching the gears and, seeing everything on the road and handling the steering wheel. And it becomes easier to just, I can't describe that. Yeah.
Yes, well, this is, as I forget now whether it was Nisargadatta or Ramana. Well, I think it was Nisargadatta. No, I don't remember which. Says, in the beginning, this can be disturbing and frightening. So let it be disturbing and frightening. You soon find there's really nothing to be disturbed about or frightened of. But nevertheless, in the beginning, you reach out for, and you watch the mind reaching out for something, as you say, to engage itself in. Well and good. How instructive. The mind does that, but the watcher does not. The watcher's not involved. The watcher simply observes that happening. Thank you. That was a very, very perceptive catch on your part.
Brother Shankara.
Yes.
Hi, this is Fred.
Yeah, Fred.
Good morning. Good morning to the class.
Good morning.
Just a quick question. Is it the watcher that directs with intention our mental activities? Like if I'm consciously quieting my mind, the watcher watching thoughts go through it, then I might stop that activity and decide to do a concentration exercise where I'm trying to hold one thought or one image. Is that the facility? I'm just wondering if that is the watcher that I am directing myself with.
This is one of the most complicated questions you could ask, friend.
Sorry about that.
No, it's quite all right. Who is it that is the doer? Now, as far as the 5 organs of action and the 5 organs of perception and the mind itself, which are creations of the gunas, Sri Krishna says it is the gunas doing all that. You can speak of it as the divine primal energy, prakriti, through the gunas, however you like to think about it. But this task orientation of ours is part of what Bohm was talking about in his remarks that were quoted. There is, in fact, no task to be accomplished. Both Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj remark on that. There is really nothing to be achieved other than the realization of what truly is. But who directs that? Well, the short answer is it is the watcher, but the watcher is the face of something behind, the power behind, as Vivekananda says, which is Atman. And Sri Krishna says that the Atman does have intentions, that what occurs in our awareness and in our actions represents either a pure reflection of those intentions or a fragmented one because of our ignorance.
So I'm operating from the true as I can in that situation. That's what I heard you just say. Thank you for your comments on that.
Well, like I say, it is the most fundamental and complicated question in a sense. And Sri Ramakrishna says, keep working and it will suddenly dawn on you who's who and what is what. All the questions and paradoxes will be resolved, as he says in his simple language, you come into the neighborhood of God. And that's done by constant practice. And one of the practices is this simple watching of the mind. Not trying to direct it in any direction, but just simply watching what happens when it's left to itself. And one of the things that becomes so evident is how changeful it is, how it does not stay directed in any one direction for very long, though it may obsess on something. It'll obsess on that, then go to something else, then come back to its obsession, then go to something else, then come back to its obsession. That's why some people self-medicate so. They can't stand the obsession.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Sorry if I want to pursue my point I was making. What if someone like me follows Swami Vivekananda's method? Take up one idea or one mantra or something and sit, focus, totally get lost in that idea, as he was saying, and leave all other ideas alone. Why wouldn't we start this way from the other end to eliminate?
Oh, Uma, that's perfectly fine. We were just doing an exercise of watching the mind. As I said, this is not dogma. This is not something you should do. It was just an invitation to participate in this exercise to see what happened. And you found it very interesting that unless you were task-oriented, it was confusing. You found that as an interesting aspect of sitting in silence. And some people, by temperament, are very task-oriented. For them, according to Vivekananda and others, the path of karma yoga is as defined by Vivekananda and as defined by Sri Krishna in the Gita. As you say, take up one thing and just work it, but with complete understanding that the results are A, not important in and of themselves,
Yeah.
and B, they're not yours.
Right.
Why are they not important? That which is doing that exercise is going to die. That which is watching or to whom you offer that exercise will not die, does not die.
Thank you for clarification.
You're more than welcome. Anyone else, dears?
Shankaraji,
Yes, please. Bala.
this is Bala. Yes, I think this is a wonderful experience. My heart felt.
You need to be closer. You need to be closer to the microphone, Bala.
Okay. This is a wonderful exercise. I really enjoyed it, and I'm so thankful to you. And this is the first time I really practiced this way. And what I felt was wonderful in the sense, maybe one thought came and I didn't even know what the thought was. It went away on its own. And the rest of it is completely silent. It is such a wonderful thing. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Well, it indicates your practice of meditation is succeeding, dear. If you can sit and watch the mind and it is, except for an occasional thought, completely still. This is the goal of meditation, as defined by Patanjali. Thank you, Bala, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's available to us at any time.
I have to say, I'm glad, Balakrishna, I'm glad you shared that because I had a similar experience. But this is, unlike what happened with you, this is how I meditate and how I meditated for years before I came to Vedanta and how I have gone back to meditating. And at one point, I felt like I was watching the mind, watching the mind, watching the mind. But probably 70% or so of the time was just, and I may have, not followed the instructions, like Traguna Shah shared that she went to just a particular, listening to her heartbeat. Well, I went to a particular, I don't know, it's just a state, a space, whatever, that because of practice, it's just kind of, I automatically go there, but it is silent and it's wonderful. It's quiet. It's bliss for me. And a little thought would wander by. It's more like it would wander by than come in. It would wander by like a little critter. Bye, hi, bye.
Well, this is your experience of that 10 minutes of silence, and that's just perfect. There is no right answer to this. There's only what we experience. But what we're learning by doing this, and obviously Bala and Cindy have already learned it, is to be the watcher and to really profoundly be the watcher is a very quiet state, as was pointed out by both Nisargadatta Maharaj and Ramana Maharshi. Anything else from anyone?
Brother, is this? Sorry, carry on. Sorry.
Okay, there were two people started at once, maybe three. Let's go with Bhagirath, and then I think the other was Brahmadas.
And Roberto.
Oh, and
too.
Roberto. Okay.
Yeah.
Brother Shankar?
Yeah, Bhagirath, you first.
When
In order of seniority.
Swami Nishay Sanandi, when he was here, he said he had been to North Pole. And when he was asked, what did he see on the North Pole? He says, there is a silence. There is a silence that he has never experienced anywhere, which is perhaps best figuratively called deafening silence. So I think even if we watch our mind to keep it quiet, it still is agitation because there are vibrations, agitation. What we are talking about is total tranquility, when everything comes to a standstill. So there are no vibrations. I think practically it will be a good idea before we venture into a 10-minute silence like this, is to have experiences. Don't say anything when you don't want to. That will be a good exercise because that is beyond our control. We eat when we don't want to eat. We hear when we don't want to hear. We move our parts of the body when we don't want to move them. To gradually take control over them and to stop the process of agitation will be a good exercise. And then even in these 10 minutes, there is nothing to watch because nobody is watching it.
Yes, no body is watching it. The Atman is immaterial. It is not. It is immaterial. It is not matter. It has no body. It is formless. Thank you, Bhagirath. Now, Roberto.
Oh, yes. Well, I have maybe not so much a question, but asking for advice or suggestions, maybe. And maybe this speaks to how the exercise is very simple, but it's not easy. The idea of not thinking about anything reminds me of the conundrum of when somebody tells you something like, don't think about an elephant. And of course, the first thing you think about is an elephant. So when you say, don't think about anything, first thing I think about is basically everything. So I was wondering if there's some sort of strategy to avoid that or to overcome that. Because I even think thinking about being the observer of everything, that itself is thinking about it. And
well, Roberto, I'm sorry, there may have been a misunderstanding of the instructions. The instructions were not to think about anything, but to simply watch what the mind did. So if we try to not think about anything, as you said, immediately, that's thinking about something. So no, there is no such thing as not thinking about. We simply watch the mind, and we slowly become identified. And I mean slowly, over years, become fully identified with the watcher. And this is the disidentification. This is the disidentification with the body its feelings, thoughts, and perceptions, the mind being included in that body-mind complex. So no, the instructions were not to not think of anything. They were just simply to observe the mind, whatever it did think about, whatever it did. And so I'm sorry for the miscommunication. One can never blame the audience. The communicator always has to take responsibility for a misunderstanding. So I'm sorry I didn't explain it in such a way that was clear. And I mean that. I'm very sorry. I'll see if I can't improve that communication about this kind of idea. Thank you for that contribution, Roberto. And of course, no, it's not possible to think about nothing. We come to the silence, but it's not because we're trying to think about nothing. Anyone else? Was there somebody else? Brahmadas, did you have something also?
I found trying, like, my mind, when I closed my eyes and started breathing deeply, my mind automatically started going to my mantra, which was interesting.
Exactly.
Well, this is what happens with task-oriented people. Karma yogis are task-oriented, and so their mind will naturally be drawn to that. So, but you said something else. You started breathing deeply. Well, that also was not part of the instruction. It's not that it was wrong to do it. It simply was not part of the instruction. The instruction was simply to sit quietly and watch the mind. But if one is habituated as soon as they close their eyes,
Yes.
it's like Cindy said and Balakrishna said, they go to a certain place quite automatically after these years of practice.
Yes.
Well, that's...
Yeah, I think that's what's happening to us who meditate a lot.
That's perfectly fine. That's what happened with you.
That's what I eat too. Because
We're the same, yes.
as soon as my mind shuts off and I'm focused on that God's image or God's...
Yes. Well, there's absolutely, like I said, there's nothing wrong that we can do here. It's just an invitation to be quiet and watch the mind and see what it does. And so those of you who are oriented in that direction, you found that you immediately went to task. Fine. That's what the mind did. Yes.
I don't know how to explain, but in my case, I didn't have any thoughts of the world or the family or high thoughts. Even my mind, I tried to, the thoughts were coming only of the background, like my refrigerator running or any bird singing outside, like that kind of. They were coming and going, like only what's happening in my environment.
Yes, well, that's excellent. That is more characteristic.
Thoughts, I didn't get any mantra or any spiritual thoughts or anything, but just whatever was happening in the background.
Well, just to continue this metaphor of the yogas, that is more characteristic of a bhakta, somebody who identifies the world outside themselves as all, however they see it, that is what their mind gravitates toward. And that's perfectly fine.
I didn't try to concentrate on anything, but that's what was coming.
Good, because that wasn't part of the instructions.
Okay.
Not to concentrate. One was not to concentrate on anything. If you practice this for yourself, let me just go over the instructions again. If you accept the invitation to practice this on your own, the invitation is to not attempt to do anything. Just see what happens when you watch the mind. If your mind automatically goes to receiving sense information, and the refrigerator's running, a bird is singing, this, that's fine. The purpose of the exercise is to exercise that muscle of being the watcher. That's the purpose of the exercise. Slowly and slowly, as we practice in whatever way we practice, but slowly and slowly, if you practice this exercise, you become identified with the watcher. It's a much more comfortable, free, satisfying place to be than the limitations of name and form. Because you can't classify it or the watcher. You can't. You can only say, it seems to be that that's who I truly am. All the rest of this is just something that is happening in the presence of that witness consciousness or watcher.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Thank
brother,
you.
how would we?
Go ahead, please.
Brother, how would we define success in this sort of practice? Like, if you want to like do this daily and measure, like, today I was more successful than I was yesterday. How would you identify that? Like, and I have a tendency to feel guilty when, like, I have thoughts. So is having thoughts not
Oh, no,
successful?
please, Rajiv, don't feel guilty for having thoughts. It is as natural as the sun rising. Our mind is nothing more than the composite of all the mental impressions that we have ever received. And that's eons old, according to Swami Vivekananda. The fact that thoughts arise is the gunas brushing against those samskaras, those mental impressions, like a breeze brushing against wind chimes. And one wind chime, you say there's a whole bunch of wind chimes of different kinds. These represent those samskaras. The breeze represents the or strong wind, if it's rajas, brushing against those wind chimes. And so some will make a loud noise, some will make a pleasing noise, some will make a dull noise. These are our thoughts arising. Don't feel guilty for having thoughts. Now, you asked, the question was, how would you define success? Swami Swahananda said there is only one true measure of spiritual progress, and that is change in behavior. If you slowly and slowly, through this exercise or any of the practices of contemplation, concentration, and meditation, and each of the yogas has its own way of going about it. But if you use this, which is an Advaita way of doing it, what would happen is as you slowly become identified with the I am, the watcher, that which is continuous, deathless, birthless, formless, you simply are not compelled to do many of the things that you have done in the past. Your attraction to them simply decreases. as we'll talk about at the end of next month, which is a bhakti month. We'll talk about bhakti yoga next month. At the end of the bhakti month, because it's close to his birthday, we'll talk about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's prayer and how in that prayer he says that spiritual practice cleanses the mirror of the heart. The mirror of the heart may be wiped clean and quenched that mighty forest fire, worldly lust raging furiously within. So spiritual practice, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends a bhakta's way, the bhakti path. But any spiritual practice pursued with patience and perseverance will yield the same results. Purification or cleansing of the heart, and therefore quenching of that mighty forest fire, worldly lust raging furiously within. You'll simply stop doing many of the things that you seemed to compulsively want to do before. And as Swami Prabhupada said, as you walk away from the West, the land of desire and death, toward the shining light in the East, you automatically leave behind the things of the West. So that's as close to an answer as I can give you. The only true measure of spiritual progress is change in behavior. We can intentionally change our behavior, but that usually won't last very long. You know, most people try going on diets to lose weight. That won't work for most people most of the time. It'll work for a little while, then it won't work. There'll be a rebound effect. If they change their attitude toward food quite spontaneously through spiritual practice, then they'll lose weight.
And along those lines, I had a discussion with another spiritual person that when we started doing our sadhanas, many, not all, but many of our interests in many of those worldly things just fell away. We just no longer were interested.
Yes.
Still like video games, but a lot of the other stuff lost interest.
Yes. Well, it just depends on what form of self-medication. Self-medication is a way of disguising, of hiding ourselves from having to look at the truth. Now that it's not that it's bad and wrong. It's simply, in the long run, futile. It doesn't work. It works only for the time that you play the video game or eat the food or whatever it is, if you're one of those people who eats as a form of self-medication. It only works for the time that you've done that. Then the mind wanders on to some other desire because, as Swami Prabhupada pointed out, desire is nothing more than a restlessness of the mind. And when we watch the mind being restless, slowly and slowly over time, the mind becomes, as Sri Ramakrishna says, like a shy child.
Well, I'd like to share something of my experience of this process.
Yes, please, Robert.
When I first closed my eyes, I immediately started to see the ripples of time and space, which generally happens. And that just continued for about 2 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And then my mind said to me, what do we do if the house catches on fire? Then I violated your instructions. but I violated it because I have a procedure that I use working with the mind. I said, you go put it out. And then it was calm again, back to the ripples. And then most of the time it was very calm. And I just kind of went into another space where I'm not even aware of my being. And all of a sudden my eyes just popped open. I didn't open them, they popped open. And then I closed them. And I went back to that space. And I was in that space till the alarm went off. The alarm kind of frightened me when it went off. I was so gone.
Yeah, it startled me too. So, yeah, well, that's a wonderful experience. And it wasn't a violation of the instructions, Robert. It was just what your mind did.
Yeah. But I wasn't supposed to reply to the...
When your mind came up with, that's that left limbic system. What happens if the house catches on fire?
Yeah.
Its job is to generate alerts.
Yeah.
And so you gave your mind responded with its characteristic response. All right, if that happens, you go put it out.
Yeah, but if you notice, I gave it a job to do.
Yes,
I said,
yes.
You go put it out.
Yes, right.
And that's one of the things I find that works with the mind when you're trying to train it. When it starts to chatter, you give it something to do.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's very interesting, Robert. You're finding there very much parallels something that is written about in Jill Bolte Taylor's new book, Whole Brain Living, about the four characters of the mind, as she calls them, talking to one another. And one of the things of the character of the limbic system, the character of your left higher cortex gave an instruction to the limbic system. Okay, if that situation that you're alarmed about occurs, you go take care of it. Mm-hmm. And that, as you said, that worked perfectly. Beautiful.
I have a question.
Yes,
a question from back earlier. You said that behind the light is darkness. Can you comment on that a bit? Explain that.
Well, it is the experience of the saints. And it has been a parallel experience here that behind all this activity, which we are aware of because of the light of awareness, is an unknown, a silence, a darkness. And all of this seems to arise from that. All of this that we experience seems to arise from that, including the light of consciousness in which we perceive it. The analog is I see my hand. If the room was pitch dark, I would not see my hand if there was no light. I would be aware of my hand in a way, but I would not see it. It is because of the light we see it. So it is because of the light of awareness that we see that which is occurring both inside us and outside us. But it is not the source of that. As Jesus said, I am the vine, ye are the branches. The vine and the branches are seeable, knowable. That which nurtures the vine, the roots of the vine, are in the dark, the unknown. There's a great explanation of all of this right at the end of the Gospel of the Beloved Companion. It's well worth anyone's time.
Who has?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
I have a quick comment and then a question.
Yes.
My comment is that I watched this Disney Pixar movie called Inside Out and thoroughly enjoyed the way they presented the thoughts and emotions and memories with that little girl's mind inside out. So I just wanted to share that. My question is, there were a couple of sentences you said that resonated with me, and I want to clarify to make sure that I got it right, because to me that was the gist, quite a gist of the topic today. That is the one who is watching and acting is temporary and is going to die. The one who is directing the watching is the permanent Atman. Is that the way? I mean, you said it differently.
That's exactly what Krishna tells us in the Gita. That within the framework of karma yoga, as he describes it, when one becomes completely content to simply let the Atman direct everything, then all anxiety and worry vanishes. So yes, the Atman is the source of everything. It is that darkness, that formlessness, that birthless, the deathless, but it is the source of the light, of the energy for all that occurs. And we can call it Maya or Shakti or Saguna Atman, whatever we choose to call it.
Can you repeat the name Gospel of what?
Say it again, please. Oh, Gospel of the Beloved Companion.
By whom?
It's by Mary Magdalene. She was the beloved companion. But it was not recognized as one of the one of the canonical Gospels, because women, the patriarchy was stronger than as it is now.
Yeah. Thanks.
Anything else from anyone? This is absolutely gem-like. This is precisely what this open forum was meant to do. Wonderful, and thank you. Yes, Lori.
Interestingly for me, it seemed like I was less hooked by my thoughts than when I'm meditating with my mantra.
Yeah.
Well, it is an interesting thing to identify with the watcher, and notice that the watcher is content to just watch the thoughts come and go. The mantra is a task orientation, and it's interesting to note as we practice our mantra the particular thoughts that arise over and over and over again over many weeks, months, years. What is it that arises over and over again? These are called the knots of the heart in the bhakti path, in that task-oriented, mantra-oriented path. These are called the knots of the heart that aren't resolved, and they will hook us. There's no two ways about it. And so slowly and slowly, particularly through prayer is also part of the bhakti path. Through prayer, the knots of the heart come untied. But some of them are really deeply rooted in us. They are our most primal fears and most primal desires, oftentimes thwarted, that have been thwarted. And so this is why a prayer is, may something of this coming year fulfill the deepest and longest held desire of your heart. And you can pray that prayer for yourself. May something of this coming year fulfill the deepest and longest held desire of my heart. In other words, may that not come untied. So you're very right, Lori, and what a good perception that if we practice being the watcher, which is part of why this exercise exists, we notice that things just arise and pass away, arise and pass away. Even the knots of the heart, though they may be more persistent. Anything else? All right, there's a final few words from Vivekananda. It's always good to leave the last word to Vivekananda. The mind has to be gradually and systematically brought under control. The will has to be strengthened by slow, continuous, and persevering drill. This is no child's play, no fad to be tried one day and discarded the next. It is a life's work, and the end to be attained is well worth all that it can cost to reach it, being nothing less than the realization of our absolute oneness with the divine. Let me repeat that. It is a life's work, and the end to be attained is well worth all that it can cost us to reach it, being nothing less than the realization of our absolute oneness with the divine. Surely, with this end in view, and with the knowledge that we can certainly succeed, no price can be too great to pay. That quote, like all these others, is in the notes for the talk. So if you want it, you'll be able to find it there. And there are, as I said, this is a very long file, 40 some odd pages, because it contains all of the quotes that I gathered to prepare this talk. I thought I'll just leave them. And if anybody wants to study further the teachings of Nisargadatta Maharaj, Ramana Maharshi Vivekananda, and for that matter, David Bohm. There's more of David Bohm as well. So it's all there in the file, and you can download it. Cindy will put it up with the recording of this talk.
Thank you for doing that, Shankara.
You're welcome, dear. Well, it was a great joy to prepare this talk. I tell you, a great joy. I so enjoy being with you. And of course, I have to be with you to prepare the talk, because no communicator can succeed without being with their audience before they ever open their mouth. You have to think, who it is am I talking to? And it's such a joy to be with you, both then and now. So, if there's nothing further, any final thought from anyone?
Yeah, I think this was a fascinating talk. And the fact that it went into extra innings today, we're an hour over, but we're all still interested, shows that this was a really good one.
Well,
yeah, I'd like to talk more about the God realized masters.
yes. Well, I knew it would go over because of the 10 minutes of silence and then the talking about it. But I'm glad it did. Like you, Brahmadas, I'm glad it did. So thank you for that. Anything else from anyone? All right. Let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. So for those of you who care to join us, of course, we have our Monday evening discussion group of love poems from God. Tuesday, we talk about the life of Holy Mother. And on Wednesday, we talk about Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. Next Saturday at noon, we'll continue our discussion of Swami Prabhavananda's How to Know God. And this coming week's newsletter will have an announcement about the calendar of talks and any other activities for the month of February. It'll also, of course, be on the website and on the Facebook page. Any final thought from anyone? All right, dears. Well, until next time, may you all come into knowledge of your true selves. Jai Ma.